Hey, welcome back to the Family Records. 6 times a week, we pull a random record out of my collection and explore the stories of the music and the musicians. We find today's musician at the beginning of his musical breakout. Music had been a part of his life since he was 10 years old when he learned to play the guitar. Leaving school as a teenager, his first band was a folk duo with his sister. They would play together until 1970, and in 1971, work on today's album would begin. Later the same year, after joining a new band, our creator happened to cross paths with an up-and-coming entrepreneur named Richard Branson. Over the next year and a half, a musical vision would be created. And even though reception to the record was middling in the early weeks, then, at the end of the year, everything would change with the release of one of the greatest horror movies of all time. Let's drop the needle on. Mike Oldfield, Tubular Bells. Now, before we get to the story of Tubular Bells, I just want to give you a couple of my quick initial thoughts. My full thoughts will be at the end here, but I picked it up. It was a thick, heavy vinyl. I wasn't sure if I was right about it being heavier, but it is, and there's a reason. And the opening of it sure sounded like the Exorcist main theme. But when I looked at the album, definitely had no clue what it was, didn't know what to expect at all, and couldn't really have any nostalgia about it, which is too bad because Mike Oldfield created an incredible debut release with Tubular Bells. He'd been playing music since he was 10. And after the Sally Angie, the folk duo he performed in with his sister, he had joined another band called The Whole World. It was before and after their recording sessions at Abbey Road Studios where Oldfield began to experiment with multiple instruments, including pianos, harpsichords, a mellotron, and various orchestral percussion instruments. And eventually, he learned to play each of them. After The Whole World broke up in the middle of 1971, Oldfield began recording 4 tracks which he had been composing in his head for years. One of these recordings was provisionally titled Opus 1. Late in 1971, Oldfield joined a new band with Arthur Lewis. Lewis's band was recording at the Manor Studio, a recording studio built out of a converted squash court in an old manor house. The Manor Studio was owned by a young entrepreneur named Richard Branson. Tom Newman and Simon Hayworth, the producers for the Manor Studio, struck up a friendship with Oldfield, and he asked them to listen to the demo he recorded. They made a copy of it and said they would speak to Branson. Through 1972, Oldfield tried to find labels interested in his music. He was rejected by EMI and CBS on the basis that his music would not sell without vocals. Desperate for money, Oldfield was starting to look for some unconventional ways to make it. He heard that the Soviet Union paid musicians to give public performances, and was at the point of looking through the telephone directory for the phone number of the Soviet embassy. It was here when he received an invitation to dinner with Branson. Branson told Oldfield that he liked the demos and wanted Oldfield to spend a week at the Manor recording Opus 1. Mike Oldfield did exactly this. For 1 week in November 1972, he recorded Opus 1. After part 1 had been recorded, Oldfield was allowed to stay on at the Manor to record additional overdubs during studio downtime. He went home to spend Christmas and New Year's with family, but returned to the Manor in the spring of 1973 to record the second side of the album. Time away allowed Oldfield to plan, and he had part 2 mapped out and sequenced by the time he came to record it. The final mixing was an involved process, with the faders operated by Oldfield, Newman, Hayworth, and 2 others simultaneously. They followed a detailed tracking chart, and the process was restarted if one person made even a slight mistake. Hayworth recalled difficulty in cutting the album due to vinyl's limited dynamic range, and insisted on heavy vinyl normally used for classical records. With the album complete, Branson visited a music conference in France to try and secure a release for the music. One American music executive apparently offered $20,000, but only if vocals were added. Branson considered putting the album out as a mail order, but instead decided to form his own label, Virgin Records. Tubular Bells was released on May 25th, 1973 in the UK. It was the first release on Virgin Records. In July, the album began to chart, peaking at number 7. In October, it was released in North America. But it was December of this year where everything would change. In December 73, The Exorcist release, and the soundtrack prominently featured the piano from Opus 1. From February 74 to May 75, Tubular Bells dropped out of the UK top 10 for only 4 weeks. 16 months after it released, it went to number 1. Tubular Bells sold over 2 million copies in the UK and an estimated 15 million worldwide. Virgin Records would go on to be a major player in the music industry for decades. Richard Branson would say in 2013, quote, "I never thought that the word tubular bells was going to play such an important part in our lives. Virgin going into space most likely wouldn't have existed if we hadn't hired that particular instrument." Mike Oldfield worked with Richard Branson for another 20 years. He played more than 20 instruments on the album Tubular Bells. The album spawned 3 sequels, won the 1974 Grammy Award for Best Instrumental Composition, and was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame in 2018. The cultural significance of Mike Oldfield's debut album cannot be understated, nor can the fact that it was a debut be discounted. Mike Oldfield is still making music to this day. Tubular Bells remains one of his most significant contributions to the world of music to this day. Truly a spectacular piece of creation. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like the story, feel free to drop a like. It lets us show you and others more of these records. If you're new around here, hit subscribe and join the family. Ring the bell so you don't miss a record. We do pull them 6 times a week. Now stay tuned for my unedited thoughts, the record pull, the bloopers, whatever was good on the recording today. Thanks so much for being here. I appreciate you guys. Love you all. Have a great weekend. I'll see you with the next record. So we're back. The thick vinyl, it was a thing, obviously to avoid the issues that our friend Todd Rundgren had on Initiation, I'm assuming anyway, since they're saying they couldn't get the dynamic range there, which is interesting because, of course, you always hear about vinyl being talked about sort of in, I'm going to say an elitist way. I don't necessarily think vinyl people are elitist, but definitely there is some conversation around vinyl that is somewhat elitist. And yeah, really interesting to hear that there's issues with the dynamic range. So yeah, that was funny. The stand-up I wrote, just a little bit too long. I got to figure out anyway, this blacked out basically. And so that sucked, but I don't think it'll look too bad. I think I can put it together pretty easily, so that's nice. And thoughts on this, like, love to pull out an album like this because, I completely had no clue what it was. It's super weird. It's completely up my alley. Like, I love soundtracks, big soundtrack guy. So hearing the piano right away, immediately, I don't even think I've seen The Exorcist, to be honest with you, but amazing crossover between sort of my interests and an interesting, really interesting album. Definitely really appreciated, and that's just one of the great things about this series is just getting the random pulls, and I never heard this album in my life, so really cool to discover. Definitely a fan. One of the things I didn't get into when I was talking about the story of this album was the stories of them making the album, which basically consisted of them getting wasted during the day, coming back at night and recording shit and messing around, which, both leads to some amazing things and some terrible, like they delete a whole night's worth of work type of thing. But I think it was interesting because I was thinking about it a lot, and it definitely illustrates this great duality between having a hard deadline and that being great for creativity in some ways because it really forces you to work towards a thing. You don't have time to take time off. You can't fuck around, and it kind of forces you to squeeze that creative juice out. But at the same time, it can be super useful to have time just to sit around, get wasted, fuck around with some stuff, and then decide, you know what, that sucks. Or not, just decide, hey, I'm going to delete it because I'm wasted. So maybe not something intentional, but an interesting part of the process, and definitely something that I sort of think about a lot for myself in terms of, okay, having a deadline is good for me, for sure. I appreciate it, and doing this series is a good example of that, where it's forcing me to put these out. So you can tell I'm not recording this in my normal time because I spent all day working on that Jimi Hendrix album, which just ended up taking a bit longer than I thought it would. And also I kind of thought that while I was exporting some of the stuff, anyway, I thought I could kind of make the time work better than I did. With this I will, though, because I'll have all this stuff in the can, and then tomorrow I can either start working on it right away before I even record the second album, or, I can figure that out. But essentially, I'll definitely have 2 albums out tomorrow is what I'm saying. So even though I said it would be today, and even though multiple times this week I've said, hey, it'll be tomorrow, but it really will be Sunday. The way I've got this set up, it'll be good. I can download all the stuff off the cameras all overnight and have it ready to go for me first thing in the morning, so I can do that episode and then do the next one and have them ready for staggered, 6 and 9 kind of thing, which I said that I would do today. But yeah, getting back to the album, it's great. Made Virgin Records. Mike Oldfield, I am super interested to hear if there's some more of his albums in there, because it's sort of said that this is kind of something that's still associated with him, like as in none of his other records ever lived up to this. Hard to say, obviously, without listening to them, first of all. And even people talking to me about this album had said stuff like, oh, the first side's great, but the second side's not that good. I thought they were both really good. They're really different. And obviously the first side is probably better, but I think also part of that is the Exorcist side of it too, because that piano is so iconic. And I really liked some stuff on the second side. Like at the end, it really breaks down into this great like minstrel sounding section, and I really enjoyed that. Like that actually might be my favorite part of the album. I'm gonna listen to it again after all this. While I'm downloading this stuff, I'm gonna record the audio for the shorts. But it's a great album. I'm really happy that I pulled this one out. Definitely on a day where, it takes a good amount to make one of these, is sort of what I'm realizing, and especially now that I'm doing the scripts and turning those around. And it's all a great exercise, me having to knock out these scripts in a couple hours. It's all good for me, and it's all good to increase my ability in this process, but it also is time consuming, and that risk of burnout is super real, and people talk about it on here, and it is true, but the joy of finding great music like this, and when you do it, it really isn't that daunting, and I've been able to leave my whole setup here, so it's good. But yeah, excellent album, big fan, glad I found it today. Let me know in the comments if you know Mike Oldfield, what your thoughts on this album are, or his other work. If there's another album that you're hoping that I'm going to find in there that's better than this. Is side 1 better than side 2? All that good stuff. Let me know. Join the family. Hit subscribe. Every day we're growing. Appreciate you guys. Appreciate every member of the family so much. And let me know about the new video format. I'm kind of tweaking with some stuff. And I won't lie, the numbers are just okay on these last few videos. So I'm not sure what exactly I'm not quite hitting on, or if it's just that I need to allow some adjustment time. We'll see, but I'm very receptive to the concept that I'm basically throwing this stuff into like a data web, and then whatever you guys watch or don't watch is definitely going to have some impact on what I'm doing. So I'm not just going to try to make content for nobody. So I'm keeping my eye on all that stuff. I know it's still early, so I'm not too worried about it at all, and I'm going to keep working on the new format. Little tweaks here and there, and trying to get the videos to somewhat of a consistent time. But honestly, that's more on the front end of the videos. So once we get to my ramblings, then we can really go anywhere. But I'm going to try to keep those shorter too. And with that in mind, I'm going to sign off. So thanks a lot. Take care. Love you guys. Have a great rest of your weekend. I will see you with the next record. Stay blessed. Goodbye.
Hot Flash got on the phones to contact some emergency services, and the night stood guard, posted up to make sure nobody else got involved. And of course, somebody else did try to get involved. How's it going?